Hi BookTube, welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and I'm going to do a review. And I think, again, I know I keep changing my mind. I keep saying I'm gonna do wrap-ups, and then I change my mind, saying I'm gonna do reviews. And because I'm really kind of struggling coming up with video ideas that are interesting, I'm going to just review all my books. Maybe I'll still do something at the end of the 2 months. Do kind of maybe not even maybe I won't review all my books, but I'll review some of them. And then at the end of the month, I'll, give you guys an overview and tell you about the ones I didn't review. I don't know. I'm still trying to, I know I've been here for a few years now, but I'm still trying to, still working on this whole, coming up with video ideas. So, right now I'm going to do a review of Villette by Charlotte Bronte. So, I believe this was her last published novel, and it is very different from her first one, Jane Eyre. This one is a lot sadder, I feel like. And Jane was so nurturing and sweet, and she made friends with the reader, while Lucy Snow, our main character in Villette, isn't necessarily as friendly and welcoming as Jane. So we have our main character, Lucy Snow. Her parents died when she was real young, so she was sent to live with her godmother, Miss Breton. And her godmother has a son, and another girl comes to live with them who's a little bit younger. Paulina comes to live with them but then as Lucy gets older, she eventually decides on a whim she wants a new situation, and she decides to go to France. And of course, this is, like I said, this is on a whim, so she probably knows the language enough to get by. She knows the language, but she doesn't know anything about France, the country, and she doesn't have any prospects, doesn't have any plans. But by, circumstances, when she gets there, she ends up working for this woman who owns Madame Beck, who owns a school for girls, and Lucy becomes a teacher. And while she's there, she makes a lot of interesting friends, including these two gentlemen whom she both falls for, who are very different from each other. And it's also about her experience in there, and how she's a very lonely, depressing character. And, there is probably the most accurate for a book for this time period description of depression, her being in a depressive state and becoming ill because of it. And it's just about Lucy's journey and the people she interacts with and makes friends with, and then these two love interests. So there is kind of a love triangle, but it's not like the kind of love triangle we have today where two guys are fighting over Lucy, and she has to choose between the two of them. And it's more, and maybe this makes it not really love triangle, but it's more she falls for one of them, but then nothing comes of it, and the other guy kind of sneaks up on her in a way. So like I said, Lucy is a very different character from Jane Eyre. She is you can't always trust her. She doesn't always give information. She kind of standoffish, keeps things close to her chest. But she's also very honest. And there's one character that she meets, Minerva Fenshaw, who she meets on the boat and sort of makes friends with. And at first, you kind of like Minerva. She seems like a nice, charming, kind of silly type of person. But then she's one of the characters that, throughout the rest of the book, the more Lucy spends time with her, the more you as the reader spend time with her, and realize she's kind of vain and selfish and bratty, and takes her friendship with Lucy for granted, and does this one thing that I cannot stand that girls do, which is the whole, oh, you're just jealous of me. Like, she just assumes because she's wealthy and upper class that Lucy is like, oh, your life sucks and you're lonely, so why wouldn't you be jealous of me? I have a great life. I can get any man I want. And it's like, Lucy is perfectly contented with her life. Yeah, she probably wishes she weren't as lonely. She probably wishes she has a companion, but she just wants to be independent. And yeah, she probably does want friends, but it's not like she needs to be wealthy or super beautiful to get that. Or at least she doesn't want to. She's like just definitely not jealous of Minerva. And I wanted to slap that bitch. I could not stand her. So, like I said, now back to talking about Lucy as a character. So she doesn't, so it's like, she is very, like, she basically tells Minerva, she's very honest with Minerva, telling her how she feels. It was like, basically critiques Minerva, telling her how she doesn't approve of her actions and the way she treats men. In fact, one of the men that Minerva kind of flirts with, because Minerva is that person who flirts with men and takes them for granted and just messes with them. And one of them is, well, he's at first introduced to us as Dr. John. But then, one of the things later you find out from Lucy, after Dr. John finds her having, in the middle of the street, she has become ill, and it's kind of a vacation for the school, like Christmas break or something, and he finds her and takes her in, and she realizes she's in her godmother's house, her house in Villette, and it turns out that Dr. John is actually Graham Brenton, the son of her godmother. And I think she knew. She admits that she recognized him. She just didn't tell us until then who he was. And he's the guy she starts to kind of fall for at first. But he's really into Minerva. He's falling in love with her and just keeps making excuses for her. And Lucy straight up tells Minerva she doesn't like how she's treating Dr. Bretton, and even tells Dr. Bretton he can do better than her, than Minerva, and he shouldn't hold his torch for her. Although at the same time, she does defend Minerva a little bit when he truly realizes that Minerva's kind of a bitch. Lucy does defend her a little bit, but the thing is, it doesn't ever really hurt Minerva at all when Lucy tells her, you're being selfish. Because Minerva is like, she just dismisses or acts like, is all like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. And, but then as the story progresses, Lucy and Dr. John or Dr. Brenton kind of develop a friendship, and there's two of my favorite scenes are, first when he takes her and his mother to the opera. The opera. I think that's the first one. And there's a moment, and that's kind of the moment when you realize Minerva is not what she seems, and she's and he realizes how much of a hateful person she is, and how rude she is. And that kind of, makes him realize that she's not worth his affections. Which is funny because later on, this girl is like assuming, oh, I can have Dr. Brenton if I want, and he'll marry me and all that. Like, she's so confident that she's still got him wrapped around her little finger, even though she's been spending time with another man. And that's kind of the moment, and so that's the moment. But ironically, I think Lucy is starting to fall out of her infatuation with him and just sees him as a really good friend. And I think that scene, and then another one where he takes her to the theater, is just the two of them, is just really sweet, and shows how much of their friendship and how it's blossomed and grown. And maybe not too romantic, but they're just really great friends with mutual respect for each other. although I feel like he doesn't really understand her depression. And I imagine unless you've been through depression yourself, you wouldn't understand it. And, when she's expresses, and he tries to tell her when it makes her ill again to just be happy. And she's like, how can I be happy? What is happiness? How is it so? It's not that easy. And she even asked him, how do you do it? And he says, I'm just happy all the time. I just refuse to be miserable and sad. And it really is definitely not that easy, especially, and if you're someone who's depressed, then you just don't get over it. It's something that, it doesn't just happen. Like, it's a state that's very hard to get out of. No, I don't know from personal experience, because I've never experienced, I've been very fortunate not to experience depression. I mean, I've gotten sad about things, but never been in such a state. Although I do know people in my life that have experienced depression. And then her other love interest is Monsieur Paul, and he's the literary teacher at the school. And oh my god, I am sorry. And as another reviewer said, Charlotte Bronte, I'm sorry, no disrespect to her, but she doesn't have the best taste in guys. Now I haven't read Shirley or her poetry, so I don't know, but both. I describe this guy as Monsieur Paul as being like St. John meets Rochester. Like, he has the passion, and he's very passionate, and when he realizes he's falling for Lucy, he expresses passion and stuff, but at the same time, I mean, and he also has a volatile temper. He's kind of an ass in the beginning. And you don't understand at that point, how could Lucy fall for this guy? But then, as I always say about Jane Eyre, it's what she wanted. Like, whenever I don't like, granted, I'm a little bit of a hypocrite here, because there was a certain show where I did not like the couple that ended up together in the show, so I was rooting for another character, and then the character got killed off, and I was not happy with the situation. But you know what? I mean, they're also not my main. First of all, they're not my main favorite couple in this particular show, and then also, it's the character, the male character, and also it's, as I tell other people, like, it's what the character wants. And even if you don't agree with it, first of all, it's not like we can change it. They're fictional characters. We don't have any control of them and their actions. So Lucy at the time wants Monsieur Paul. So it's like, even though I don't get it and I don't know why, it's what she wants. It's what makes her happy. But like I said, the part that makes me think of St. John is how, like, St. John, St. John, when Jane in Jane Eyre is with him, he tells her he wants her to be his missionary wife because he thinks she's perfect for it, and he forces her to learn. He's like, instead of wasting your time with that language, you should learn this language. And he forces her to learn a language that he wants her to learn. And there are quite a few scenes where I think Monsieur Paul is very pushy and all like, you should learn this, or you should learn this, or I'm going to teach you this. And he doesn't understand why she doesn't always cooperate with him, and she bites back. But then, when his feelings start to come out in the open, he acts a little bit closer to, he acts more like Rochester in how he is towards her, and he's very affectionate, very passionate. You can see he clearly loves her, hasn't fallen in love with her. It's just, at the same time, like I said, he's a volatile temper, and he's just kind of an ass. And Dr. Brent is a little bit better. He might not always understand Lucy, but I think he's at least a little more nicer to her and doesn't belittle her as much. But anyway, so the other important relationship Lucy has is with Paulina, who, like I said, she was mentioned in the first part of the book. So she actually comes back into Lucy's life as a teenager, and she coincidentally is Ginevra's cousin. And there's a lot of coincidences and conveniences where characters cross paths in this book. Characters that, you don't expect them to have any connection to Lucy, that she just met them, but you learn that there's a lot of that all these characters just keep meeting again and crossing each other's path. And Paulina is so sweet. Like when we first meet her, she seems like just like not bad, but kind of a bratty little girl who's like wants her way, and she's not as bad as Ginevra, but but then you meet her as a teenager, and she's just really sweet and really respects Lucy and really cares about her, and she's even surprised in that Lucy's a teacher, but not in a, oh, you're a teacher, like more in a, oh, like, like you like probably like I feel like Pauline would assume that she could do better than being a teacher, that she deserves a better position, a better job. And at one point she even asked Lucy to come with her and her father in being her governess and her companion. Well, I guess companion means she's not a little girl anymore. So she really cares about and respects Lucy, and unlike Ginevra, who doesn't respect Lucy, like she takes Lucy for granted and feels like she needs Lucy, but then walks all over her and, treats her horribly. And then, but I really like her relationship with Pauline. I think that's really sweet, and it's like a kind of sisterly relationship. And Paulina's relationship with Dr. Brenton is kind of interesting too. Like, kind of like as soon as it started happening, I kind of called it, but the direction their relationship went. But at first, I didn't think about that. I didn't see coming until over time it progresses, and although I should have seen it even right away because of how they were as kids together, because they had a relationship when she was a little girl and he was a teenager. It like, there was almost an affection between them in the beginning. But yes, and another scene I really like, the part of that shows her depression, I think, Lucy's depression, is when she is, like, Dr. Brenton promised to write her letters because he knows how lonely she is. He doesn't really understand her depression, but he knows how lonely she is, so he promises to write her letters. And these letters make her day. They mean the whole world to her. And to receive them, and he writes her a few letters, and then after a while there's at one point where she hasn't heard from him or his mother, her godmother, in like 7 weeks, and she's just so worried something happened to them, and she's just freaking out. And then eventually her godmother does send her a letter telling her, updating her on what's going on with them, and she assumes that Lucy's very busy herself, and it's such a relief to Lucy when she gets those letters. So it's interesting, like, for her, it's this big deal, but for Dr. Brenton and his mother, it's not really. They're like, oh, I was just going about my days, and and they don't understand how this really how much this means to Lucy. In fact, when the first letter she received, she almost loses it, and like loses the letter after she has this weird encounter with it, because there's a legend of a ghost at Madame Beck's home, which I think is really cool. And she sees a spectral figure, thinking it's the ghost of the nun that haunts the school, and Dr. Brent is there for her and comforts her. And of course, being a man of science and / doctor, he doesn't necessarily believe it's true. He thinks she might have been imagining it, so he's trying to comfort her and find out what she saw and everything, and then she starts panicking because she left his letter, and she thought she lost it, and it's returned to her by, I can't remember if it was Madame Beck or one of the other teachers or something, but it's such a relief to her that she's found it and it wasn't stolen from her. And he asked her about that letter. He asked her, he's like, it's just a letter. I mean, it's why does it matter so much to you? And she kind of tries to pass that off as, oh, I really like the letter. I really appreciate you writing me this letter. So, but she doesn't admit that it's such a big deal to her. She just tries to pass it off as not a big deal, but she liked it, but doesn't want him to know that it means the whole world to her. And that's one of the things about her, is that she tries not to, she's honest, but she tries not to show too much because she doesn't want to be, because I imagine she doesn't want to be vulnerable to anyone or to make people think that she's needy and that, that especially as someone of a lower class who's, wants to be independent, she doesn't want people to feel like they have to, take care of her or doesn't want to be laughed at and mocked for how things like these letters from Dr. Brinson mean to her. And I don't think she wants to admit that she was infatuated with him at the time, because of course there's the possibility he would laugh at her, or he just wouldn't feel the same way. And then, like I said, her relationship with Monsieur Paul is very interesting too. Like I said, my first thought is, why is he I kind of, at certain points, I kind of start to realize, oh, so this is the other love interest. And I was surprised, but then at the same time not surprised, because like I said, he's very similar to Rochester. Although this guy makes Rochester look like a saint, in my opinion. And their relation is very complicated and complex and interesting. So, despite the fact that he's an asshole and I don't understand why she falls for him, it is interesting to read their relationship and watch it grow and become this love story between the two of them. It's actually almost kind of sweet, despite his personality being very unappealing. And then another character that, is also very compelling is Madame Beck. At first, Madame Beck and Lucy are really good friends. I think there's a mutual respect between the two of them and an understanding. But then she's, for some reason, but then she kind of starts to get between Lucy and Monsieur Paul when he realizes that there's something going on between them, that she doesn't want it, because I don't know if it's because she likes Monsieur Paul. I mean, I think that was implied, but then also you find out that she is connected to his first love, Monsieur Paul's fiance or wife or whatever, from before, and that she's related to her. And I think she feels like she doesn't want him to move, maybe she doesn't want him to be with anyone else. And so I don't, so yeah, there's respect in a sort of friendship between the two of them, but at the same time, once Monsieur Paul and Lucy become potentially romantically involved with each other, there's a certain, there's a frigidness between the two of them, between Lucy and Madame Beck. So I thought that was, surprising. The book is very slow. Now, this is my first time reading, so maybe if I read it again next time I read it, I might go a little bit faster with it, but it was a slow read. And there were times I was feeling towards the last parts of it, I was feeling like, is this almost done? And I wasn't enjoying it or wasn't interested in it. It's just, I wanted to eventually, I was eager to move on, to read something else, to read some other books, but I wanted to finish this because I did like it and I had a good time with it. And also, I don't like leaving, unless it's really long, and this one is not that long. This is which I'm surprised because there were other people who have said their copies are like in the 600, but mine's in like the, not counting the notes, it's 476. So it's close to 500 pages, but still, like I said, some people have said their copy are 600 pages long. Although my copy, I don't know if it probably makes a difference. The print is a little bit bigger. And I'm trying to determine if the spacing, because I just recently, last night, I watched a video that talked about a booktuber I haven't really watched as much yet since I've subscribed to them, but I'm definitely going to change that. She was talking about her favorite editions of classics and talking about for her, the print is the big thing. So about the print and the spacing and stuff. So I'm probably going to start thinking about that a lot when I'm reading. But what's nice is the print. I think a lot of people would like these editions because the print is big and, you can easily see it. And I think the spacing is pretty good, too. I don't know. I'm not an expert. I don't pay attention to stuff as much. But so I think these are pretty good readers. But the notes aren't as thorough. Or at least there aren't as many notes. But I think there's a brief. Let me see. There's a really brief introduction paragraph, but that's it. Just a paragraph, or a little over half a page of like an introduction, and then the only notes that are in this edition which is really nice because so this book, there's a lot of French dialogue in this book because our character Lucy's in France. And when this book was first published, I imagine that, the Brits would have learned French and would have known or at least some of them would know French. I think I've heard that somewhere, that it was common to know French. But there's, the only notes they have is translations of the French quotes, which is really nice. So, that's really the only criticism, is sometimes the French threw me off a little bit. Now, if I tried to read this out loud, I'd be terrible at it, but in my head, I sounded great when reading the French. I mean, I still didn't know them, but I could sort of, in my head, have some idea, or at least try to say the French dialogue. But I think that can kind of throw you off if you don't know French. So, but like I said, in this translation, there are translations. In this version, in this edition, there are translations of the French, like in the back. But anyway, I liked how this took place in France. I like that, and I thought that was really cool. Although I was trying to picture France, I kept thinking of London, England for some reason. But I was trying to picture France. I've only been there to France once because my sister studied abroad there because she took French. Not that she remembers any of it though, because if you don't practice it and don't use it regularly, a language, then you're not gonna remember it. So she doesn't remember it, but either way, back in college, she went to France, lived in Aix-en-Provence, which is basically the countryside of France, and we did go to Paris, and I did try escargot, and at the time, I remember liking it, but I have not tried in a long time. And although, funny story, the first place we went to when we got there was, we went to the Louvre for our first stop, and I fell asleep at the Louvre. I just spent the whole time sitting on this couch. There's one of those round circular couches, and I just fell asleep on there. My mom offered to stay. I think it was my mom that offered to stay with me. So we both missed touring the Louvre because I fell asleep. And it's not that it was boring, it's just we flew all night and I was exhausted. So, I mean, I would love to go back one day and see it. and, actually explore it without falling asleep. So I think if I ever get a chance to go to France again, I will not do too many touristy things the first day I get there, and just maybe grab something to eat or something. Maybe walk around if we go to Paris or another city or wherever, and then go to all the touristy stuff after the fact, because I do not want to fall asleep. But anyway, so yeah, this is pretty good. I still don't know how I feel about it. I mean, I probably relate. I was gonna say I probably relate more to Lucy, but you know what? I think I'm kind of in between Lucy and Jane as far as personality goes, relating to them. But this was really good. It was I feel like unless you're a classics reader regularly, I feel like this one is very underrated as far as a classic. And I feel, especially because Lucy is such an interesting villain. And I think a lot of people's biggest issue, and all I'm going to say is I think people don't like the ending of this one. I think that's one a lot of people's biggest issue with it. So now, next I got to read Shirley. And I also got to read Anne's other book. Oh, and then their poetry. I got to read their poetry. So I'll have to track that. I'll have to track down their poetry and get a book of their bio book, author books of the poetry. And I was just reminded that Brainwell did write poetry, because I was watching a year-old book haul from Jennifer Brooks, and she had for the book haul she had bought. Well, I guess it's not really that a year old because it was back in August, so it's a little less than a year old, I think. But anyway, that's not important. So she had, one of her purchases was a Penguin Black Spines edition, I think, of the Bronte's siblings' poetry, and Branwell was in it. He had poetry in there. So I'll probably try to find that one so I can read their poetry. And I do want to read, and I'm going to read The Professor, which I have not bought yet. And I got to read Tenant a While, Phil Hall, and then Shirley. And then I think other than their poetry, I am good, I think. Oh, and then The Professor. I've read all Bronte's work, the Bronte work. So yeah, so this is my discussion, my thoughts on Villette by Charlotte Bronte. If you haven't read it, well, although I think I kind of spoiled a little bit for you guys if you have read it, if you haven't read it. So I will make a note on the description box that says, reminding people that this might have spoilers. I don't know what people would consider spoilers or not, but I will leave a little note that this might have spoilers if you haven't read it. So if you don't want to take the risk, then you might not want to. You might bypass this review, and if you have read it, then tell me what were your thoughts on. If you have read this book, what were your thoughts? Please share in the comments below. So if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Click subscribe if you haven't already. And click the bell icon below to be notified when I post new videos. And I hope you're staying happy, healthy, and safe, and enjoying your reading. All right, bye!